Hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to the Spirit Society of Baltimore. We are speaking here from our headquarters, and today we're gonna have a little bit different the presentation of this book that Leo has been doing every month, every two chapters. Well, he has picked like two chapters, right? And so today's section 9, chapter 16 and 17 of the book. Leo is going to give continuity to the, um, if I'm not mistaken, to the city, the city of justice that the Spirit went to. And today I think that is further, the title of the chapter is further arrangement, right? Further arrangement. So Leo is going to bring more of the highlight of these two chapters. So I don't want to spoil it. Unfortunately, Leo is not here in the Spirit Center physically, but he was very um, gracious to pre-record his presentation because he said that he doesn't want to miss any month. Okay, so today's section 9. We have his presentation here. We'll present, and then after he finish, we'll come back and see if there is any question from the audience here. I already told people here that if I cannot address the question, so we have to hold the question when Leo is going to be here next month talking about the book. Okay, no further more explanation. Let us bring Leo here to the screen. Let me see here. Okay.
Hello and welcome, dear friends, to session 9 of the discussion of the book On the Way to a World of Regeneration. Today we will be discussing chapters 16 and 17 of this amazing book. We have made a lot of progress. We're kind of towards the end right now, following each month, kind of working in a couple chapters, if you will. There was only, I believe, the previous two sessions that we only cover one, but it was so intense. It was a lot of work, a lot of information that Manuel de Miranda brings to us. And today, as we said, we will be discussing chapters 16 and 17. No different whatsoever from the other chapters that we have discussed. The entire book is amazing and brings a lot of insights, a lot of teachings that has happened throughout the time that we all faced, we've all been through during the pandemic in both realms of life, in the physical as well as in the spiritual realm. Um, and we have seen several enlightenments, if you will. Each of these chapters brings a lot of information to all of us. And this two chapters entitled Further Arrangements and Illumination of Conscience is a continuation of what we have seen, the preparation in our revered visitor, explaining what happened in the spirit realm along with the physical realm as well, in the works, the behind the scenes to help those who were in need going through the pandemic, and the visit to the city of justice that we saw that was extremely intensive as well. So, further arrangements. What are these further arrangements and illumination of conscience? Let's take on because there's a lot to discuss. I try to condense as much as possible and cut quite a bit of text so we don't become bored, so don't we become attached to the actual text. And I believe this will help us also, hopefully, to go back to the book and read the book and make our own considerations, formulate our own questions, and really exercise the teachings that we go through as well in this book. Further arrangements, taking back from where we left off, right? We can, as we said, the city of justice. What happened was Manuel de Miranda and others, they were in the spiritual realm visiting the location, the actual location where the justice makers, right, were applying their ideals, judging others, persecuting those individuals who were connected with negative thoughts and their feelings that really brought them to that position. And the what happens at the beginning of the chapter is that Spinelli actually comes and explains that the visit, the actual program, was already scheduled and prepared, but he could not discuss it before due to the many difficulties that could have hindered its execution. So, interesting enough, here we get a clarification or the insight that everything had been already prearranged uh, in a higher level between Spinelli and perhaps others that were in the spirit realm who were trying to or preparing to visit the location where the makers actually quote unquote lived, right? And but they couldn't say anything because it was such of a let's say in a way a high order process or program that they had that they could not actually mention to others so it wouldn't hinder the actual program. And interesting enough as well is that the program was carried out all over the world, different locations, not only at the locations where they were. This connects as well with the meeting that happened as if you remember, I believe in chapter 15, well, not 15, chapter 14, when we come in contact with that beautiful meeting that happened in the spirit realm where we were given the insight as well, or we reminded that not this was not only happen over in the spiritual colony of Brazil, one of the spiritual colonies, but also all over the world with leaders all over the world to explain what was going to happen as well, and in this moment of transition that we're going through. And then the planetary change, he also mentions that the planetary change is radical and it's part of the progress, right? So this is something that is going on not only all over the world, but it's very, very radical in terms that it must happen in order for us to move on or to fully enter this transition, right? Where certain things in our lives in planet Earth cannot happen, cannot continue to be in order for us to, or must cease to exist in order for us to move on into a more elevated humanity, if you will. This is very interesting because they connect with the engineers as well by explaining by giving a full account of what happened, right? So there is this discussion of what's happening in the beyond in terms of there's the account of what happened during the work that was performed and what's happening as well in that area. They also give the insights again that the locations where they were it was as of a deplorable sight, right? Not only the region but also the spirits as well that were there. Much like we would see in terms of going into a very dark or uh, a region of necessity, if we can put that way. But again, it's really interesting how they bring all the that is happening there. But we don't want to get stuck in terms of the physical appearance, but really to connect that the physical appearance is actually a projection of how those spirits, those individuals there were vibrating, right? So it's important for us to connect with that it becomes a consequence. It's not the cause. The cause is actually how those spirits are vibrating. So it also says that the soft light that allowed us to see them made us pity their horrifying aspects and face disfigurement. This is talking about the spirits that were there. The implorations came in the form of screams and revolt, complaints and justifications. They also attacked each other in a disheartening and never ending spectacle. So we see that the area was very demanding in all shapes and forms that we can imagine. This is not to scare us. This is not to really, make us feel any an adverse way, but to truly understand what we're dealing with, right? The environment that we're dealing with. And the point here is to really emphasize that locations like this, not only in the physical sense, but also in the spiritual sense, can no longer exist, should not exist anymore in order for us to move on to a better state, a better, create a better humanity. Entering this amazing idea of a world of regeneration. It's not that we are not, again, I like to say this and emphasize this, is that a planet of regeneration, a regenerative planet, is not that we will all be happy, but we will make better choices, right? And in order for us to make better choices, the majority, and for us to get into make better consensus, right? The majority has to be on the same page, and it cannot be vibrating in connection with these minds. But we're going to see a little bit more of this. On the other side from where we were standing, a spiritual group appeared, advancing through the swamp in a single file. Some carried old lanterns, which shed a reddish light, while others held shiny nets um, that stood out in the dusk. Spinelli told us that it was Saint Elizabeth of Portugal in her sublime mission of pulling out from the abyss the spirits that presented vibrational changes, repented and in sincere need of help. They enter, and this is not only mentioned in this book, this actually has been mentioned in other literature as well, spiritist literature as well, in terms of showing to us that this rescue in the spirit realm happens in such a way where the Saint Elizabeth in this case here sent out or used to actually the way that Manuel de Miranda explains is that she used to throw kind of like flowers in the swamp that would had this really nice light that became then a actual net, and some of these spirits actually would grab to these nets, trying to receive the rescue. Unfortunately, some of them were able to be rescued. Unfortunately, some of them were not. And we're going to see why. Listen, let's take a look at this. She actually comes and she is singing. The way he presents to us is that he is singing to these spirits to help them, to enlighten them as this rescue is happening. And she says the following. That's why we put it all together. It's really beautiful. There's way more than this. There's a continuation to it, but I'm just going to read the beginning. And it's important again that we go back and reread the book so we can connect with these words as well. She says the following: Suffering souls in search of redemption, your pleas have been heard. The Heavenly Father's magnanimity and the love of our Lord Jesus Christ come to you to tend to your needs of deliverance. You know why you are in this stronghold of penance and punishment, chosen by yourselves, by you yourselves. You feel tired and regretful, understanding the illusions of the fragile and decayable body and contemplable and rebellious spirits. We have come for you under the support and tenderness of our blessed Mother, the Lady of the Angels, who took pity on your sufferings. This is a last opportunity. It should not be disregarded, because soon another torrent of the most harsh sufferings will pour over you in the great transfer to other, more primitive lands. The all merciful Father does not desire the annihilation of the wrongdoer, but the removal of the evil that still resides in us. Excuse me. One thing that I want to touch before we even discuss this message here is that for many of us, and I like to say this because perhaps we may have brothers and sisters who maybe watch this in the future, hopefully, that may be in the first context with Spiritism, right? And we bring again the picture or the presence of the excuse me, Saint Elizabeth of Portugal in this to this discussion, right? And what we want to say here is not that we are um, bringing any Catholic ideas to the discussion here, but it is in fact the saint that we are discussing here, right? Of someone who dedicated her life doing her reincarnation on Earth, that was canonized, who became a saint by the Catholic Church, but who still maintains this appearance, but doing the work not only for spiritists, for whoever is in these locations now, but the souls, right? This despite the fact that this or that spirit or this or group of people in the flesh as well, because we still pray for these saints, right? We still pray for certain individuals, right, that we know, or we ask perhaps in a way for those who passed that we trust that are in the beyond, right, who have passed to help us, to guide us, right? But it's not for us to get caught up on the idea that, oh, spiritism is connecting with a saint, right? I just want to bring this to light that much like Joanna de Angelis, who was a very hard worker and still is in the Catholic Church. If for those who wants to know a little bit about Joanna de Angelis, I mean, we see her works in one of her reincarnation in Mexico, right? Sor Juana de la Cruz, right? And we know that the work behind the in the spirit realm continues, and which is something else that we're going to discuss later on. But that I want to just kind of bring that to light so we don't get caught up on the idea, on the just the pictures that we bring, or the idea of being a saint, right? The work that she does, along with these areas with these individuals, is great, because as I mentioned before, it's not something that is mentioned only in this book, but in other literature as well, spiritist literature, right? But moving on to this, she comes and she's singing to these spirits who are in a deplorable situation, the justice makers, who have softened their hearts, who wants to get out of that swamp, if we can call it that way, and make themselves, or bring to themselves, the ability to of a less chance, right? This that is mentioned here, and it's not only a less chance for them, but for all of us to calling for all of us to analyze this opportunity that we have right now as the last chance, right? For us to make better choices, for us to eliminate the negative things of our life. So there's a lot here that we can learn from. And again, there's more that she brings to us as well in terms of the 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 care that she shows to these spirits, and it's not only her, but it's a group of spirits that work in this endeavor. But look at this. It's and I brought the the net, a picture of a net here, which it's kind of hard for us to represent the spiritual net that is rescuing these minds. But Manuel de Miranda mentions to us that afflicted spirits would frantically grab the mesh, which held for some while reaping for others, who would fall back into the muddy swamp as they try to free themselves from that terrible place. So some of them, actually, the net would hold on to them, would give them the ability to stay connected to it. Some others, they couldn't. So we may ask, okay, so why is this? Is this that God is not merciful, or the rescue is not effective enough that is rescuing everyone? And look what happens. He explains to us that we learn later that those who did not succeed in their attempts in reality were not repentant, but only frightened, and thus the vibrations of the saving net did not hold them for lack of a corresponding energy. Those who were able to hold on were lifted, as in a common fishing net, and helped by trained assistants that transferred them to the stretchers and placed them on a welcoming grassy area some distance away. From there, they were moved to recovered chambers, restarting their wasted lives. So we see that There is a program to establish the rescue, as we saw with this Spinelli, where they have all this work, this preparation before they enter the location. They have these caravans of love actually rescuing these spirits as well. And then what do? They take them out of there, and there is a aftercare, much like we see in hospitals, right? All the preparation to receive the patient and to assess the needs of the patients, and then the aftercare, right? Sending them to the locations where they will be needed. They will need to develop to to regain control of their lives, right? Because they were saying here their wasted life. Just a reminder that some of these spirits, they're disfigured, in meaning that they're in such a deplorable state, mentally speaking and morally speaking, that they became like animals, right? Their form, their spiritual bodies became of an animal form. So just to highlight, and we can go back to the previous sessions, the previous chapters, and to where Manuel de Miranda goes in depth, very in detail on how that happens as well. In any case, the work is beautiful. There's a lot of preparation. There's a lot of work in the between, but also in the after. That they're not just relegated to, okay, now we rescue you by yourself. No, a lot of these spirits are actually being helped in all throughout until they reincarnate again. And I'm quite sure as they reincarnate, what we get our help from, obviously from our dear Creator, from our Master Jesus, from our mentors. Some of us like to denominate the or give the denomination of the guardian angel, right? Or the Holy Spirit, whatever we would like to say. But it's a beautiful way that we are always guided. And I like to include ourselves on this as well. I like to include ourselves in terms of we are also receiving this guidance. We are also there before, perhaps not in the same swamp, right? But many times we find ourselves in this deplorable state that we do not know how to get out of there, right? And we need these helpers, right? We need this amazing work, whether we are of following this religion or that religion. It's we always need these minds that are more evolved than ourselves, much like we need incarnated beings, friends, loved ones, family members to guide us from childhood to adulthood, right? Even us, adults, or we like to nominate ourselves adult in the physical body, we need the help, we need the guidance of one another, and we need one another. That's a beautiful thing. But it's interesting that Spinelli, after this all of this explanation and this beautiful work that happens in the spirit realm with Queen Elizabeth here, we see that he comes and gives to us he reminds us of what we need to do in terms of our spirituality, in terms of what we do, especially us spirits, right? Spiritists. He says the following: we need to inform and alert the reincarnated good workers of what is happening in the causal realm. In the spirit world, we must encourage them towards an upright moral conduct and charitable deeds as the guidelines for existential equilibrium. The majority of spiritists are aware of the severity of these days and the profound changes occurring in the terrestrial society. The planetary transition has been in serious activity since the end of the last century, and the comeback between duty and negligence, as well as the spiritual testimonies that affect almost everyone, represent the increasingly serious circumstances of the present moment. Um, we're going to go on more into this here, but again, this is an alert for each one of us, for all of us to really dive into these words and really make the changes in our own lives. We know, we understand, but are we? The question is, are we really applying this in our lives? And I ask this to myself, right? Sometimes we come across certain things in our lives, and we flip, right? We kind of flip the switch to go back to our old ways, attacking others, making unnecessary comments, and we judge others as well. We become justice makers, not as bad as some of these individuals that we have seen, some of these spirits, but we tend to justify things or to perhaps live in a convenient way with the outer world, right? And sometimes in a convenient way with ourselves too. So, as Spinelli is reminding us here, the a true combat of what we have done in our lives, on how we have conducted ourselves, right, throughout our lives. And we may say, perhaps since we now know that we are acting this way, which is a collective, the result of the collective lives that we have had, right, the repetitions that we have had, we come then to the unnecessary acts or thoughts that we have day in and day out, that we need to police ourselves and change how we are vibrating towards ourselves and towards one another as well. As we saw, some unfortunate communities from the spirit world, lower zones, arms themselves with legions to penetrate social groups as human organizations, creating embarrassing and disturbing situations with disagreements, hostility, collective spirit obsessions, and moral decline down the unfortunate pathway of unrestrained behaviors. So, as we have mentioned, nothing new. Also, when I say as we or the spirits Spinelli, Manuel de Miranda, is that these groups of spirits, these groups of individuals, they are connecting with us based on our flaws, based on the way we vibrate, the negative ways that we vibrate, right? They're not connecting with us on the goodness that we do. They're connecting with, with the negative ways that we perhaps conduct ourselves. They find the door to enter in our lives through these flaws, right? It's not that we're inciting or we're asking to lead a perfect life, but to be aware, right? To really live by prayer, and making sure that we are always watching, right? Watch and pray. The Spiritist doctoral groups, and then he goes very specific towards the Spiritists. The Spiritist doctrine groups are not lacking in distract adherents who have not yet been morally touched by the wonderful concept of the Spirit's codification. Frequently, when warnings are given regarding moral behaviors or relationships, the response is that there is great exaggerations in the information that comes from our sphere of life. Some, when they are kind, hastily label them as animism or easily accuse them to be deceitful messages given by mocking spirits or even by mediums themselves. And so on, they prefer to adopt new trend behaviors, innovations, labeling the faithful as orthodox and themselves as more evolved. So, this idea that perhaps a lot of information that we're receiving, much like this book, can be seen as, oh my gosh, this is such an exaggeration, right? Is it truly happening in the beyond? Are these attacks really happening? It is, and we feel this, right? All that we need to do is to change our vibration and to try to let go of a bad habit, right, or something that we have been doing over and over and over, and we start feeling the attacks. We feel weak, right? We feel that perhaps this is not going to last for too long, right? Much like when we start going to a diet, or let's not even say a diet, or a better way to eat, right? And we see that it's so hard because we receive the bombardments from all over the place, all kinds of all corners, people throwing the bad food at you, and sometimes we feel weak towards the desire of perhaps leading a better diet, or if you will. I know this is a poor example, but it's just a way for us to represent on how when we decide to change our behaviors, that there's a lot of things that comes against it. Everyone will fatally discarnate and face firsthand the reality they refuse to accept. And again, it's the denial, right? How we live on denial. And he reminds us that Spiritism is the reaffirmation of Jesus and his message in a more kind and progressive way in terms of how we see ourselves, how we see the future as well. He mentions about civilization's intellectual and industrial development, that perhaps we have made great um, um, uh, trends, or seen several great trends as well, and we have advanced quite a bit in these two areas, right? However, we also have created with them, with these with our intellectual and industrial development, that we have created quite a bit, and taking in consideration what we have seen during the pandemic, with all the technology that we had, with all the development afterwards, right, trying to find a vaccine, that we create a lot of mayhem in our lives as well, unfortunately. A spiritual influence that corresponds to aspiration. He also mentions that the influences that we receive is not that we're directly being attacked. Yeah, we are being attacked, but they correspond. The attacks corresponds to how we vibrate. So nobody's gonna knock on our doors to look for a party if we're not throwing a party, if we're not living a lavish life, right? If we're living a righteous life, guess what? Nobody's gonna knock on my door to look for the party. They're not gonna come to me asking for mundane things if we're trying to live a, again, more spiritualized life. And when we say is spiritual life here, again, we wanted to encompass a religious life, a righteous life, whether we believe on this or that. And I like to say this because these justice makers, they are uh, they are coming against all of those who have chosen to live a better life, or to lead a better life, despite their considerations or religious acceptances. We must prepare ourselves to love and serve without limit and breadth. This is a beautiful reminder that it is the basis for us to enter the world of regeneration, this level of regeneration, to then solidify to a point where we will then transition into a world of a happy world, right? Where um, I would say, perhaps several hundred years from now, we will be living a more, we live in a happy society. And then he actually brings a case of revitalization of energies that we'd like to call. There was actually a spirit who received the moratorium in as the last case that they bring on chapter 16 here. Interesting is that as they go back to the location where they're being hosted, and they're helping as well, that they notice that Manuel de Miranda actually mentions that the passes were going on, the vibrations were going on, and a lot of help was happening in the location. And that this individual who was actually receiving this moratorium because he was such of a good moral order, he was giving the ability to continue to live, even though he was going through a very critical moment in his life. The physical body was not responding well anymore, and he received this infusion of energy, right, through passes as well. And it's the case is very interesting because they describe that there was this spiritual, um, uh, not only the physical but also the spiritual apparatus as well that was helping this individual. And they had more like two syringes where they were actually inserted in this individual, and the other part of this apparatus was connected to Claudio, the spirit worker, who was actually one of the past givers, right? That had actually a very great knowledge in passes as well. And actually, they start exchanging energies, if you will. So Claudio was connected to the other end of this apparatus, and he received the man who was in need, incarnated, start receive, and they actually induced a cardiac arrest. As we mentioned here, equipment beyond the physical, two transparent tubes, each having a needle at the end, One of the needles was placed into an artery of the left arm through which an almost vaporous liquid was flowing from a transparent container placed above. Excuse me for the typo there. Fluids or emotion mixing to achieve homogeneity, since they seem to be distinct from each other. And this is actually as the other end of this apparatus, right, was actually connected to Claudio, the past giver. The fluid came from the actually Manuel de Miranda actually explains that the 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 fluidic actually that was being used in this transfusion, or the help that was given to this man, came from a nearby fruit tree and the ocean plankton as well. So the energy that was being given to this individual, much like a blood transfusion, was actually obtained by from these two, from the trees and the ocean plankton. And as we mentioned, the he was actually induced a cardiac arrest, excuse me, was performed to restore the organs, the way the heart actually was pumping and receiving blood, in the physical body as well. And they did not know what caused it, but it was actually caused in the spiritual realm, for him to start again, to work. And the towards the end, they explained that this rescue was actually being done by a spirit worker, that now gave continuation. He's in medicine that he was actually doing here on planet on the Earth, on his last reincarnation, and he continued the work in the spirit realm, in helping continue to work as a doctor as well. I do forget the name now. I didn't bring directly here, but it's very interesting that how we don't stop what we start, right? If we are doing goodness, we can continue on and doing the same thing in the spirit realm and give a continuation until we move on into a new endeavor. But the highlight here on this case is that it was a moratorium, right? This man was actually leading a very good life, was doing goodness, was being kind, and he received the moratorium of continue on, more on planet Earth to continue his work as well. So the continuation is in both realms of life as well. Moving on to chapter 17, because this is also an amazing chapter too, illumination of conscience, right? And this right here, not to give too much, but it is an encounter of the bishop that we saw, on previous chapters. That was actually the bishop that was being attended to, I believe on chapter. I'm trying to go back here. Think. Excuse me, chapter 15, when they go and they visit the Justed Makers, the location, the actual location, they talk to the bishop. The conversation, I remember, I did not bring too much of it, but it was a very difficult conversation, in with this mind. And then now, there is a reencounter, and we think that the spirit has quite in a way have been treated already, but that was just the beginning, right? That was just the beginning where he was taken from the location, and then he actually, this work was actually done. And much like the chapter 16, where the work, was prepared in advance, the same here happens where another mediumistic meeting is proposed, and it's actually programmed where this spirit would be brought, through the medium to be helped. Mind you, that the mediumistic meeting is happening in the middle of the night, where the mediums and the workers of the spiritist, house where they were working, they were sleeping, and they were brought in to help this mind that needed to be rescued as well. So let's see what, Manuel de Miranda has to say, at the beginning of the book. I always like to bring these teachings because sometimes he's poetic, sometimes he reminds us of very interesting things. And this time he talks about time. Time is always of essence, and when it involves relevant tasks, one does not realize how quickly it rushes by. It's much like a reminder, right, that we have received in many other through many other authors, right, in chapters of the books, in different books, where let us utilize our time wisely, right? Let's do the best that we have in our hands with the time that we have. And if we're doing well, sure enough, it's going to go by fast. So we have to do the best we can with what we have. A great amount of help was extended, especially the therapy of passes, encouragement to afflicted individuals who call the Blessed Spirits institution, as well as urgent assistance to fearful persons frightened by lying or exaggerated print media and television statements. So we have mentioned this before, and we brought this as a highlight as well of this chapter, because not only everyone was going through quite a bit in terms of the fragility of the physical body during the pandemic. We saw many of us lost loved ones, and we still, there's a lot of great impacts on our society because of the pandemic. But there was the worst, we don't want to call the worst, but the craziness also came with a lot of the craziness that came um, from the media, right? From the TV, from what we listen on the radio. Now with the different social medias, right? Vehicles, we receive a lot of misguided information, a lot of alerts that were not helpful at all. And again, Mr. Miranda always brings this to us and invites us to perhaps be more assertive, right? And even though the helpers work continue to work and they continue to work, when they see that the help is going on, what do? The attackers, they continue to attack. They attack even more. And he brings to us that there were a lot of retaliation, right? Several other attacks were performed against the institutions where they stayed. Organizations already inclined to mayhem and belligerence became stronger. So institutions, companies, groups of people, individuals who are already connected to negative things, guess what? They receive the boost that they not that they needed. They received a boost to continue on and create more madness, right, in our lives, in their lives as well, in the lives of others as well. And I'd like to extend this to perhaps those individuals who were in charge of making a difference, and they couldn't make a difference because again they were connected to they were inclined to negative things, right? So groups made up of soulless individuals lacking moral feelings and religious faith joined them in their wrath against Jesus and his disciples, luring to their ranks the heartless and seekers of lustful and consuming pleasuring. The workers of the good and ethical duties began to be harassed for their ideals and even anathematized for their bravery in confronting them. Many of its members, who discreetly harbor antagonist ideas, felt encouraged by the general situation, breaking their silence and the disguise under which they hid to close ranks with the radical and aggressive crowds. This is very important for us because it doesn't take much for us to, let's say, fall into the edge of from the edge of madness and connect with these higher minds, well, these negative minds, excuse me. So that's once more how important it is for us to watch and pray, for us to lead a very righteous life to the best of our abilities. Not that we're going to be perfect, or perhaps, or at least to for us to ponder on how we need to be a better individuals from what we were yesterday and tomorrow, perhaps what we were today, as we learn on the gospel according to Spiritism, right? To be a better individual. And again, as we connect here, let's say, as we learn here from Manuel de Miranda, in terms of if we give ourselves to what the madness that is going on TV, the madness that is going on in the world, or perhaps unethical conversations that sometimes we allow ourselves to connect with. These minds, these negative minds, for lack of better words, they will attach themselves to ourselves. They will connect themselves to us, right? Because we are the ones opening the doors, and the 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 more they see us doing, the more they're going to be looking for these flaws, these open doors for them to connect with us. These are not spiritist teachings. These are the teachings that our Master Jesus have reminded us, have taught us 2,000 years ago, right? That we need to be to lead a righteous life in terms of being a good and moral individual. The attacks towards honorable spiritist workers continued to happen, and they became stronger. These deceitful spirits started to give communications falsifying the teaching of of the ethical doctrine in terms of spiritism, talking about spiritism, where we did actually connect with some of them, where individuals were receiving information that were pretty questionable, if you will, right? And the light was shining brighter. This last comment here is really interesting because Manuel de Miranda mentions that yes, the attacks became harder, right? And there was still a lot of, let's say, the work multiplied, but the light that was being shined as well from the spirit realm in terms of help starts shining brighter. The analogy that is given by Manuel de Miranda is that if we are in a very bright place, right? And you have a candle, a very simple candle, right? It's not going to give much light. It's not going to make a difference. But as it gets dark, right? If we were to turn off our light, and we have the light in front of us, that very small candle, it's going to bright. It's gonna shine brighter, right? And it's much like the help. The analogy is used in a way for us to see. Let's look at the light inside of us. Let's look at the light that is shining upon us as well, for us to liberate ourselves from these um, old ways of living as well. So it's really interesting how although we are studying something that is very, let's say, negative, dark at times, and we have to really attend to these realities. We have to face this reality in order for us to move on. But also, he give emphasis on the goodness, right? It's not only talking about the negative that we'll move on. We need to face, our old ways, but understand as well that there is always help from the beyond. Moving on. As we mentioned, there was another scheduled mediumistic meeting where the spirit who was actually rescued prior on chapter 15 comes now and start having a conversation again to be enlightening, right? And the information that we're going to bring here is very brief. I urge you to, for sure, go and read the book because there is much more than this. Um, but I believe what we're going to bring is going to be enough for us to see, or at least to understand, materialism at its best, because what is going to be mentioned here is actually coming from a spirit. It's not coming from a someone who is incarnated in the physical body, because we tend to think, okay, wait a minute. To be materialistic, you have to be in the physical body. Now, let's see what is brought to us by Manuel de Miranda in terms of this conversation in the beyond of this of between the bishop and the helpers of this location. Completely dazed, more than 20 spirits from the city of justice were already there, brought in by skillful discarnate aides. In addition to them, a number of mocking and frivolous spirits watched the scene, and those who were supposed to communicate, but for the time being under special spiritual care, remained asleep or semi-unconscious. So we can see here that these minds were brought, they were rescued to this location to receive this enlightenment. It was not just the bishop, but the bishop, since he was the head of them, of this group, was given the ability to speak directly to them. The return of Bishop M, and he says, and he actually brings that everything ends, and it is consumed by time. As we said, materialism at its best, right? A spirit telling us that everything ends and it is consumed by time, right? And this is the thought, the feeling that is actually produced on the hearts of many of us, right? When we are in despair, these are the justice makers coming to us and really telling us directly that we are this, we are nobody, or that we die with the physical body, we don't continue on. The spirit continued. There is only chaos in everything, and we are the successive waves of nothingness is still preserved at the moment. First, the coarser layers are diluted, followed by the mental tears, and so on, until nothing is left. We're moved by the pleasure and hatred for those who interfered in our plans. We came to restore the historic nothingness and prepare ourselves to extinction. Again, folks, I know it's hard to associate these these words, right? These phrases, and there's way more that if we were to stop and bring the whole thing here, we can actually uh, probably create a seminar, not directly on the negative things that is said by Bishop of M, but actually on how we allow ourselves to dive into nothingness that way, right? So the spirit is actually as the head of this group, he's inciting minds to do this with planet Earth, right? To incite this idea, this belief that we're nothing. We with the death of the physical body, we don't continue to be. And he is very aware of the reincarnatory process, that we come back, that we actually move on from this life to the next, and we have our lives giving we give continuation to our lives between the different reincarnatory successive reincarnatory experiences that we have. So it's really interesting. But our dear friend comes and tells the spirit the following. And again, this is a very brief part of the conversation. This is actually the beginning only. There is much more than this. It would undoubtedly be an aberration of logic and knowledge to contemplate the universe and everything it encompasses. The self-builder that reached a stage of beauty and progress in human beings, as being the result of nothingness, as if that nothingness was the cosmic force that gave rise to it. We could change its name, replacing God with nature, nothingness, or an equivalent designation, but it would always take us back to the starting point, to the great question that has been presented in the infinite of time, right? Infinity of time. And then he goes on into this conversation to really alert this mind that perhaps we don't cease to be, right? We don't become extinct, right? We continue on. But there is a reason why the Bishop of M is actually this way. There is a very um, I don't like to say conscience, but unconscious reason, right? The reason why he still vibrates this way. As many of you remember, it was also brought to us that this spirit, unfortunately, or let's say, I shouldn't say that, I'll take that back. Fortunately, was given the ability to reincarnate. And many of his reincarnation, where did he incarnate? He was given the ability to take part into the religious arena, the most important religious arena of its time, was the actual Catholic Church, right? And he reincarnated several times in these nucleus, right, of the Catholic Church. and he misused his opportunities to do things that was very nefarious, right? And actually trying to diminish the work of Christ, to break the work of Christ as well. But it was because he had a very severe fall in the past, if we can call it that way, not to judge. And we're going to see what happened. So we see here that the treatment was applying a formula of rescue of the past, of the spirit and his victims, to include a 14-year-old in the convent. In one of his reincarnations, is brought to us that he actually was unfortunately mistreated, right? Abused a 14-year-old who became pregnant, right? And later he forced the young lady to abort the child, right? To abort the pregnancy, right? After that time, she actually committed suicide. Unfortunately, she committed suicide. And this is in a very, let's say, a long, long time ago, where the spirit committed this unfortunate act towards this spirit, as well as, and not only abusing her, as well as making her abort the pregnancy, where she became very ill and actually killed herself. And this spirit, these spirits becomes attached to him, right? And then we they take this information, because this being the basis of his madness, he uses he becomes this justice maker to actually um, to diminish his anger, to diminish, not, I shouldn't say the anger, but the way he sees the world, right? The guilt, if you will. And it's very interesting that the Manuel de Miranda explains to us that not infrequently the spirit conceals reality behind convenient fantasies. At the time of self-encounter, beyond the physical body, reality sheds these artifices, reappearing with the strong characteristics that had been obscured. The reencounter with the events stowed away in the mind produces moral shocks of a high magnitude in those who had wished to hide them forever. Once these true masks come off, used during the phase of the loathsome behavior desired to be kept buried, the being is constrained to a self examination with the consequences deriving from it. These ploys, give rise to the ideoplasties that cloak the wrongdoer until a deep pain or something powerful destroys the image created, and another cycle corresponding to his or her inner reality begins. Many malevolent spirits adopt horrifying forms to forget the evils they carried out, and thus hide the villainy practiced against their neighbor. Let us take a moment to digest this. I know it's a lot of information and we read straight through it. We create these new forms, right? We create these new masks for ourselves, trying to hide the past, the negative past that we have created. Try to forget those whom we have hurted, right? We tend to show ourselves to be stronger than what we are, truly just to put aside, to step on it, on the past that we have created. Instead of facing it, we tend to hide from it. And in that process, we create more madness, not only for ourselves, but for other individuals as well. Most importantly, those whom we have left behind, right? And again, it's a calling for all of us, because sometimes we find ourselves delaying our progress, because we don't want to face ourselves. We don't want to face what's right in front of us. We create excuses. We analyze. We tend to, as we again learn with Spiritism, we're reminded through Spiritism what Jesus have mentioned to us. Right? It's easy to see the imperfection of others when we have our own imperfections and we hide ourselves from it. Right? We don't tend to see our own imperfections. And as he says, many malevolent spirits adopt horrifying forms. We don't adopt perhaps horrifying forms, but we tend to be someone else that we're not, right? And we forget to be ourselves. We lose our identity as well. And thus hide the villainy practice against our neighbor. So, yes, we're talking about a spirit who is in a very deplorable state and is being helped. Imagine what is being done towards us for us to change ourselves, for us to become a better being, someone where we look on the mirror and we tend to accept ourselves more because we're facing little by little the old man inside of us, the old women inside of us, right? That individuals that we want to let go. But sometimes we find it so hard to do so because, again, we don't want to face the reality. The spirit was helped by the Lady of Nazareth. Look at the level of help that this spirit is receiving. The analysis of how we also are responding for the sheep of our Lord. The one of the things that Lady of Nazareth actually comes and talks to this spirit, right, is to remind him of, look, in the past you were assigned, if you will, several sheep, right, from our Lord, and you mistreated that sheep, much like us. We could be individuals who are guiding a group of people at work. We can be individuals, teachers. We could be family members, right, that we need to help, and we put them aside, right? We do things that perhaps in the future we'll have to come back and face reality to fix not only ourselves, but the madness that we have created in their lives as well. The consequences are being shown to us right now. We all have been there, and this is the true calling, not only for the spirit, but for all of us as well. This is the end, perhaps towards the end of this chapter, we see also actually another spirit that is being rescued. I don't want to say rescue. I think he had already rescued himself. That Manuel de Miranda mentions that the spirit comes and gives also a communication where the spirit becomes more soft because of the work that he's seen that is actually that he has seen happen under the name of Jesus. Look what happens. The we're going through this transitional moment right now of difficult moments, if you will, um, because of what we have created in the past. We have seen through the books that preceded this one that a lot of well, let's say 100% of this that is going on right now is a consequence of ourselves in the past, right? How we act individually, how we act collectively. So a lot of spirits, they are coming back to knock on our doors and to receive the payments of, perhaps what we have caused in the past. But there are also a lot of spirits, as a reminder of this rescue spirit, that are looking on the good deeds, on the things that the changes that we have proposed to ourselves, and we are executing it, that we are truly doing day in, day out, despite our difficulties. They're also changing. And they think, well, if Leo did it, if this or that person did it, I can do this as well. I believe this person is truly is showing some resignation on how we have to approach one another. So it's a beautiful reminder. We didn't bring the case directly here because of time. We wanted to make sure that we bring you this insight of reading the book, really going and analyzing it. That's why there's some text still, obviously, but not as much as we have brought in the past, so that now we can go back and dive into it. We can watch the presentation before, we can perhaps watch later, or do whichever way we want in order for us to understand more. I would love to hear more questions, more comments about it. Perhaps, send it over to us that, whatever comment you may have. This is actually a pre-recorded meeting. So leave your comments, share your comments with us. Perhaps next time we meet again, I will be answering some of the questions. If something was not clear, let me know. And as always, I like to show it to you that we have made a lot of progress. There's a lot of information in these chapters. We will try to cover chapter 18 and 19 next. And then for the month of November, we will actually we'll cover chapter 20. But before we cover to chapter 20, what we would like to do is to kind of do some highlights, right? not only of this book, but all the books that preceded this one, before the pandemic, before the highlights of the this transitional moment that we're going through, right? For each one of us, I know it has not been easy. It has been a transitional moment for each one of us in whichever way we want to see it, right? But the highlight again is that we're being watched in both sides, the good side, the bad side, and the good side as well. Our mentors, I am quite sure that there are those who lived, who preceded us, right, who were our loved ones who have passed, those who stayed behind when we reincarnated. They are wishing us well, that they are praying for us, they're connected with us for us to transform our lives, right? Waiting for us to go back, get back on the other side, completers, right? To be better than what we when we came here, right? So, wishing everyone a very happy study, and won't be with you directly when we present this meeting, but I will be in heart and mind as well, waiting for your questions and comments, and hoping that we can meet again until session 10. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Leo. We know, as we mentioned in the beginning, Leo was not here. This is a pre-recorded presentation, but we would like to spend at least 5-10 minutes here with our audience, and also go to the comment to see if we have questions. Let me take a look here. Okay, so we have a question from Yasko, and let me put it here. So Yask says, was this Saint Isabel the queen that miraculously transformed bread into the rose in the middle of the winter when her husband, the king, who had prohibited her to feed the poor and lepers, decided to cut her with hidden bread in her clothes? Yes, cool. Very good question. I particularly don't know. I don't know if Leo has any information about that, but I guess we're gonna pass the question to him, so maybe he can make some comment about that. But I have no idea that um, Saint Isabel, and I'm not sure if this is mentioned this chapter, because in this chapter they mentioned the chapter, right? Now, they mention about the Elizabeth from Portugal, Saint Elizabeth from Portugal. I don't know if he asked your question is, do you wanna know if they are the same spirit or is a similar situation? So I don't remember Saint Isabel, the queen, in this chapter. Do you remember, Paula? Yeah, testing your knowledge. Maybe asking further clarify. Yeah, we don't know. Yeah, but thank you, Alex, for participating. Also, we have Ab's comment. This is fascinating. Thank you for sharing this thought with us, Leo. Thank you, Abby. Thank you for connect to us. And we have another question from Yasko. Yasko is asking how to shift the route these malevolent spirits that adopted animals or other horrified forms had taken, making them to start to face the evil they had done. How long does this process take? Very good question, he asked. And we know that the uh, transformation of the perispirit is done by our thought, right? So the guilt feeling, the all the mental um, enforcement that we do toward evil will somehow impacting the perispiritual form, right? So how long it's gonna take? It depends of the spirit. I think one thing that is very interesting that the chapter 16 discuss is about um, the the environment, right? That Manuel de Miranda when they was disclosing the further arrangement, the first chapter, the chapter 16, is that those spirits that was there, as you mentioned, Yas, they present in a very animal-like form, right? And one of the things that Leo brought to us is that um, even the process of rescue was not all the spirit was able to be rescued because the mind of some spirit was yet not repented, right? That was Leo mentioned in his presentation. And I think um, kind of respond this part of the chapter respond your question because um, Manuel de Miranda explained that even if the net was thrown to those spirits, those that is still not repented, that I think that's still like change the mind, they are not able to be rescued, right? So take that explanation and put in your question about the form like that the spirits present has to do with, the how the mind of these spirits is still fixating in the bad thing that was done, and they don't want to repent. They don't want to recognize that that actions, whatever was done, is impacting the spirit itself. Um, Thank you, Leo, for giving this talk, and Hazara, a lot of hearts and prayers. Thank you, Hazara, for connecting. So Hazara put that link over there about the Saint Elizabeth of Portugal, Bread into Rose. I think probably ask this link that Hazara put over there may. Um, so now I think I got it. You are asking about, I don't know if you, when you mentioned Santa Isabel, I don't know if you wanted to say, Saint Elizabeth, right? That's why I was a little bit confused. So I did a couple highlight by listening Leo's presentation that caught my attention, and I would like to share with you guys. Um, that I think is important for us to leave here from this presentation, bring to our own life. Um, every time we study Spiritism and we see the cases in those books, it's for us, right? It's kind of like a the spirits bring this to us so we can do our evaluation about our life, so we cannot end up one day like some of those suffering spirits, right? And I think every time when we study a book or read something, despite sometimes we become very curious about wow, we kind of sometimes forget to do a self-evaluation. Like for example, me, Daniel. So how my thought is gonna go. So I'm think like that way, or maybe I'm just like sitting here and looking at the other one suffering, judging, but I'm not looking to my life, right? So I think that's one analysis that we can do for ourselves, and this is very personal, right? Um, okay, Paula, do you have any question? Because I know that you have the book over there, and uh, okay. Paula said that she want a more explanation about idioplasty. Idioplasty. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. The idioplasty. Yeah. The idioplasty. Yes. So plasty means that can. So the idioplasty is the process that someone become can plasmate, not the plasm, but for example, they can create it, manifest a situation through our mind. So not fantasy, but for example, I'm gonna give an example. So if I it could be going to a fantasy, but becomes a reality for that person. For example, if I think that I'm um, a horrible person, that will make me a horrible person because I keep in that loop thinking and meeting that thing. If I think that I'm a good person but don't do anything, I may create that reality that is not real. Okay, so but in this case, the opposite will in they mention this because those spirit that is that looping, okay, they create their own reality based in the mind. They create joining answer. So the creation of a reality based on what in your thought.
So these video classes from reading this book seem to mask the evil doing that they did,
Yes, yes,
and they're only going to get jolted.
correct.
Some deep, painful experience or something powerful is going to start to crack that
Yes,
mask.
and we have a lot of example like this. For example, in the book, um, um, Liberation is an example of that. We have the Spirits Gregorio, that mindset that he is the judge. For more than 300 years, he was in that situation. We gotta have a point that loop, that creation break. Nothing is forever. Evil is not gonna be last forever. At some point, need to be break because that's not our destiny. Our destiny is perfection, right? And to be a perfect spirit, we should be devoted. We should not have imperfection. Like we should not have evil in our mind. But until there, we really need to go this process of um, evaluation. And for example, in the case of Gregorio, he became a little bit permeable because when we do something that is against God's law, at some point you're gonna break down, right? Because you get tired. That's you got tired to be a just maker. You get tired to make bad thing, right? The only thing we don't get tired is to do good thing. When you do good thing, we're gonna do more and more and more and more, and that pushes us to you know toward this evolution toward perfection. And that's a good point.
And also, I was thinking on a different, I mean, pretty close to Yasko's question on how long is it going to take this person to,
Mm.
like we're talking right
Yeah.
now, eventually have something to wake them up. When when those souls were being rescued with the net, they were saying this is like your last chance. Otherwise, you get transferred to a primitive land. And I know we've talked about
Correct.
that before. It's where the souls go who are just not getting it here.
Yeah.
So my question was similar to Yasko. So when the soul goes to the primitive land, they stay there until something shifts in them. Because there's no other place to go. That seems to be like the ultimate place to
Yeah,
go to wake
the,
up.
the mechanism, and let me repeat for those that are following us online. So yes, no, Paula is follow up in Yasko's question about those spirits that um, decide to, not decide not to change and stay in that form. And the chapter mentioned that this is pretty much like the last chance. So after that, they will be transferred to another place, another planet. And Paula wants to know if this change only when we're gonna happen. I mean, like as we mentioned, I mean, like time is for God. There is no time, right? But it's on that spirit to at some point, realize that being in that situation is not helpful for the spirit, right? Because at some point, they will need to move on, right? So you're right. I mean, like you gotta have a moment that um, you need to make that shift. Um, and if the pushing doesn't, if the push does not come from inside of the spirit, outside, there is external factor that will push you to do that. A good example for this is like, you know, there are people that like to say, I'm this way, I'm not gonna change, you know. And then there is things that happen outside of the person's control that make that person change. So it's external factor that may happen, right? We see like a lot of calamity that happens, and we see that people change after that experience. And if it was something that came from outside, it was not the inside out, right? So we have several mechanisms that the divinity provide to us for us to, you know, make our change, make the shift, right? So, but that's a good point, good question.
We have,
One more?
yeah,
Okay.
because this was new to me.
Hmm.
Act, the beings in the spiritual world, how they still connect to earthly things. Like in that very interesting transfer of fluids, when the spirits created the cardiac arrest, that was
Hmm.
interesting. And then they hooked up from Claudio and Spirit to the patient. But what they did, which was interesting to me, was they took the energies from the earth,
Yes,
the ocean plankton and the fruits.
exactly.
So in other words, there's a tie back here, and just a new way for me of how spirits are using
Yes.
the earth. And the other thing I connected that to was the passage that when Jesus appeared to his disciples after he rose from the dead, he ate boiled fish with them.
Yes.
That was different.
Yeah, we are what maintain us alive as a organic beings is the vital fluid, right? The vital fluid is a transformation of this um, universal fluid that sustain the universe, right? So everything that we see, matter in general, so is a transformation of this primordial vital fluid. This vital fluid can be um, transformed several times to become something solid, right? So, for example, our body, in order for the spirit to animate this body, the physical body, we have a certain amount of that we call vital fluid. The moment that we lose, and as we age, we are losing slowly those vital fluid, right? So how do we replenish the vital fluid? Like sleeping well, eating well, is breathing, breathing. So this is the way we kind of replenish, but in the totality, we have the amount that will diminish as we get old, right? So in those cases of, in this case, the case that Leo present about the um, the man that was given a moratoria, right? He was uh, receiving that. In fact, they received a extra amount of vital fluids, so that allowed him to live more couple years.
But they needed it from the earth's
Yeah.
substances. It
So
wasn't
the
just vital
source,
fluid.
the source of the vital fluid comes from the organic things. For example, I can donate vital fluid. When we give a passes, we are donate those fluids as well. We can spirit can get those vital fluid from plants, from nature, you know, because it's organic beings, right? So that's what they get. The mechanism and the nature of this vital fluid, we don't know. Science cannot, you know, so but that's what we learn in the spiritist literature. So when we talk about Jesus cure, the healing process has to do with vital fluids for sure.
But he didn't need the boiled fish. He was the spirit.
He-
He ate it. He did it to help the disciples recognize him, or that was just
Maybe somebody said about that.
Yeah, the
It was
specific,
weird.
yeah, yeah, that is something that maybe we can discuss with Leo because he was the one that put more time in the chapter than myself. But I think all this is a great question, Paula, and I think that's the beauty of this Titles book because we read once and we kind of get it with the information. Some of the information is straight to the point. Others is maybe we need more time to understand the process.
The book Daily Bread, I think there
Mhm.
is a passage there where they say about that Jesus divided, shared the bread, transformed,
Yeah.
that the bread, in fact, like the fish, maybe, it's that goodness that comes from God and
Yeah.
the Word. The Word and the life that comes
Yes,
when
that.
you have Jesus, so, it's like you have constant feeding,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? Like he came back and had the food with the disciples,
Mhm.
and that was
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? The
Yeah, no, it's
constant
possible,
feeding,
and I think,
spiritual speaking, but
yeah,
the fish, like the bread of life, the fish of life.
Rather
yeah.
than real physical.
The thing that probably we,
Yeah,
and this is our limitation, right?
Yeah.
So all this thing, we don't know the mechanism, how this is done, because we are not perfect spirit yet. We are not in the level of Manuel de Miranda. They break down this information as easy as much for us to understand, right? They're not gonna bring informations that probably is hard for us to understand, but it's gonna require us to also put time, you know, uh, in, learn new things in order for us to understand. Okay, so I guess we are on time. Yasko made other questions here. I'm gonna read. Yasko just said, "Thank you, Hazar, for the wonderful information." Liu may answer if he's the one, if she is the one he mentioned tonight. Okay, yes. Um, Also, I think this low-level spirit usually work in group, gang, she said, but eventually some members move on, and he or she will feel isolated and tired, and also may become more permeable to the argument why he or she wants to stay stuck without family members.
Remember, they're
Perfect. I think what he also mentioned. Yeah, and I think what Yas mentioned make totally sense, and goes toward even what Julio Padovan brought to us in our last meeting on Thursday about, yes, like, you wanted to stay in that mindset. There is a time to change, because those that is together with you, at some point someone's gonna get tired, it's move on. And when we look at around, you're gonna be by yourself, so you're gonna be forced to also move on, right? So nice comment, Yasko. Thank you for your participation, this great reminder. Yeah, so because of time, we're gonna stop the live stream here now, and we're gonna move to our passes here at the center. But again, thank you everyone. Continue reading the book. I was planning to be here today, so if I didn't answer, clarify your question, so we can get Leo next month and bring these questions back so he can give his input as well. Okay, thank you everyone, and have a great night. Um, and we see you next Saturday. Bye.